Hi, everybody. I'm Jay Ellis. I work at the CFV and have had the pleasure of developing and building TechLab, and I want to tell you a little bit about the program and why it's important and what we're doing. So let's start back a bit with the automobile. Incredibly disruptive technology. Has roots back to the late 1800s and was serialized in production in the 1900s, but since then has really just been a platform for iterative design improvements in safety, in experience, in all sorts of things that make cars great today. But disruption hasn't happened in a while. But it is happening now. You're seeing companies like Uber, like Quanergy, Zoox, raising incredible amounts of capital and doing incredible things. And the automotive industry is looking to these startups for the disruption. But they still have to work with traditional auto companies and traditional tier ones. And that's where we come in. So we want to be a part of this here at the University of Michigan. We want to help develop these technologies. We want to work with these incredible startups here on campus. And so we created TechLab. And so we're matching students with these cutting-edge technologies, these startups, and developing the technologies at a resource like none other in the world at Mcity. And I'm proud to say we have 3 of the companies here with us this semester: Civil Maps, PolySync, ZenDrive, and we have the students working with these companies already. And we're so excited to have you guys here and be developing these technologies, contributing to the advancement of your companies here on campus. So, Sravan, you want to talk a bit about Civil Maps?
Sure. So Civil Maps is essentially a 3D mapping company where we leverage cars that are being driven by humans that have the ability to generate depth data. By depth data, I mean data coming from cameras, LiDARs, etc. We would then process this data to create map information. So the raw sensor data is a couple gigabytes per kilometer, so it can't be transferred over cellular.
Hang on, Sravan, what you can't see is behind your head, they are starting to play your videos. So
okay.
We don't want you to be at a disadvantage competing with your own audio visuals.
Okay. So what you're actually seeing here is a 3D semantic map localizing to the environment. And we're contextualizing our 3D map and creating an augmented reality experience. So based on the car's intentions and what it's trying to do, we can communicate back to the passenger the relevant information at the right time, and then also allow you to see what the car is seeing and have it operate safely in complex urban environments. Yeah. That's a brief overview.
What are the green things?
The green things are the possible trajectories for where your car can go. So within intersections, based on which lane you're occupying, there's several paths that a car could take. So the blue represents the lane you're occupying, and then where you see the zebra crossings, those represent the pedestrian crossings.
Got it. Thank you. Yeah. Okay. Tell us about PolySync.
Okay. So PolySync is, I'm going to stand up because I talk better when standing. PolySync is a platform for building autonomous cars. So you can think of it kind of like Android or iOS, but for cars. And if you're not familiar with the car world, you may think that they sort of build software in really smart and intelligent ways already, but in fact, it's like super old school. You end up on these cars with actually like hundreds of different tiny little modules that are all kind of like Arduino. Does anyone know what Arduino is? Yeah, okay, so like think of like into your car, there's like 100 Arduinos running.
Wait, what if I don't know what Arduino is?
Okay, Arduino is like a tiny little circuit board with a little tiny chip on it, and you write code in, well, basically in C. You know what C is? Yeah, okay. Low-level programming.
Wow, it sounded like kind of a challenge, hey.
All right, low-level programming language, if you were in Michigan.
Thank you.
Yeah. So they write this code in this like really low level, and everybody writes their own little modules, and they kind of hook them all up into this like science project that ends up being a car. And the way that they actually make this thing work is they drive it like 2 million miles in the process of 5 years of hooking up these little modules. That's why it takes 5 years to get a car out, and why new features take like another 5 years to get to new cars. It's mind-blowing the deeper you get into it, how inefficient it is. So what PolySync does is it makes developing software for cars more like developing software on your mobile handset, which means like you're building apps, right? You're building your Maps app, or your obstacle avoidance app, or your cruise control app, right? And those things all come together magically and seamlessly in the way that we've pioneered and done a really good job of in the cloud or on mobile. So much easier, shaving years of time off development and test and validation. Like imagine that like any one of you could start a startup and build an app that does something amazing on a car and expect that like you could sell that to Ford and see it in production like in 6 months. Like, can you imagine that world? And that's the world we're building.
Let's go to your video then.
Which is going to be hilarious.
Okay, he's promised hilarious.
Look, I think if this is a video, I think it is. Okay. I'll give you some background after you.
All right. Do you want to give us context first or after?
After. Let's watch it.
Okay. Hit me.
If we look at the history of computing, platforms always result in exponential acceleration of technology. Today we have millions of devices all doing general compute on different apps that make them do amazing things that we never expected. What we're trying to do with PolySync is create that platform for automotive. My name is Josh Hartung. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Hartung Technologies, which is a small robotics software firm in northern Idaho. What we see on the road now and what a lot of the products that are rolling out are level 3 systems, so driver assistance systems. In level 4, the driver no longer retains the capability to take control. One of the coolest things that we think is coming with level 4 and level 5 architectures is this centralization of computers on the vehicle. Higher power, more centralized processors, each one of them running these safety critical algorithms. These are things like object classification, computer vision. So this is why we built PolySync. We built PolySync to enable automakers to build their own level 4 capable architectures. Time to market is cut significantly. We're talking about 70% of the effort that goes into these cars is suddenly gone. They simply hand those algorithms off to their production folks who are also using PolySync.
The white point cloud data is from a rotational laser scanner. You can see some object recognition. This is a car here.
A lot of the systems that are out there today are built for one specific purpose, whereas PolySync, we really built it to be this really modular system that can be used for any vehicle or any manufacturer.
The decisions for next generation automotive architectures are being made now. So Hartung has the capability to bring forward a platform solution that will significantly reduce time to market and really consolidate the technology in a very short period of time.
Sometimes it's hard to believe that a handful of guys in northern Idaho are really trying to define what the automotive industry should be doing. But in the end, what we do have is a great product that can increase the safety of all vehicles that are on the road.
Yes.
So that little short clip was called A Forward Vision. So the forward vision probably should be more like that was about a year ago. So in that time, we we raised our first $1 million in funding. We moved to Portland. What do they say? Four guys. We're at 25 now. I had a baby. I sold my house to moved into a rental. So the vision is similar. You know, what I would pitch it as today is different. But the amount of churn that happens even just in a year, no matter how polished that looks, is absolutely incredible.
All right, so you're feeding me into my very first question today, which is, since this is the first class, you know, the word entrepreneur is popping up everywhere. You know, I'm an entrepreneur, I got out of bed, I did an interpretive dance. What does the word entrepreneur mean to each of you three?
Should I go first?
Sure, you're closest.
For me, it's the ability to just start doing with a hypothesis of what you want to achieve and whether or not it's feasible without the fear of failing. I think that's really important, and that's what allows you to iterate. And the ability to learn from things that you've tried, and whether it's successful or whether it's a failure, is, you have to put a lot of emphasis on the journey, because a lot of things that you assume when you start off are most likely to change, and a lot of things that you think your customers want are actually might not be important. So it's flexibility, adaptability, drive, compassion, focus on the problem, focus on sort of innovation, and the agility to go from each iteration to the next with some learnings. So there's a common saying is build, measure, learn. So taking your product to market should be one of the key goals. And I think there's going to be a lot of people that join you on the journey. You'll have investors who will be sold on the vision, or you'll have investors that'll try to get you acquired. So you have to sort of align your personal motivations, your company's mission statement with various parties, and make sure that everyone is equally vested in the journey, and sort of maintain your company culture and grow your employee count. And there's different hats that you have to put on at different stages of the company. Like when you're fundraising or putting a team together as founders, there's different aspects to what you need to do on a day-to-day basis versus post-funding, when you have to answer to your board and deliver on product milestones. And then when you're spooling up new business units and trying to capture different market share in different environments with different demographics, then that's a totally different person. So I would say entrepreneurship means to me very rapid evolution of a person and very accelerated personal growth. And you use the startup as an excuse to take on that journey.
And Sravan, it's like we scripted this, but we did not. That's the theme for this semester, you guys, is Journey of an Entrepreneur. So as we talk to other guests that are at various stages in either their industry or their company or their life, I want you to pay attention to how their perspectives are similar or there is dissonance, and see what resonates with you. Josh, what is an entrepreneur to you?
Yeah, I mean, I found myself sort of thinking about all those things as, kind of going through my own journey. Entrepreneur is one of those things that is kind of heavily overused. It's a platitude in a lot of ways. People want to go you hear the term serial entrepreneur, right? Like people that just keep doing that. But what does it mean to actually
that you can't get a job?
Yeah, right. Think of a lot of small business owners. Often the refrain, right, is I own my own job. Not just in tech entrepreneurship, but in all entrepreneurship, it's about taking a risk and about sort of voyaging into the unknown. Entrepreneurship to me is courage, but it's courage paired with the experience of failure. So this failure thing is a really interesting thing to me that it's being bandied about as the cool thing, right? Failure, that's great. Let's fail and move on, right? But I actually live in constant fear of failure. Failure is bad. Failure is heartbreaking. Failure means that I might not be able to make payroll. Failure means that people that have taken massive risks for a vision that I just came up with one day, right? Those people may be substantially harmed. An entrepreneur is somebody who has experienced that, right? It's somebody who has failed and it hurts. Failure is not good, right? If you fail and that was good, right? There can be positive outcomes, but you were just trying to learn something. That means you succeeded, right? If you fail, don't fail. Try not to. And you will. And to me, that completes the circle of entrepreneurship. The courage to know that will happen, and the fortitude to have survived it and to have moved on.
Before we go to Jay, so you talked about everything that's happened in the last year. What gave you the courage to pick up and move to Portland and make all of these life changes concurrent with continuing to grow your company?
Fear of failure. How's that? You know, you do the interesting position about being a CEO is that there's this sort of like idea of the like all-knowing, all-handling CEO that sails above. That may exist out there. Like maybe that's Elon Musk or something. That's not me. Like for me, being a CEO is a highly selfless position. I don't get to do many of the things that really, at least used to sort of light my fire. What I get to do is facilitate. I get to make sure I create an environment that other people can succeed in. And basically, sometimes I can get a little bit out for me, but usually not. Right?
All right, that's a good...
So the move to Portland, so the move to Portland, taking all those risks, it was really about creating an environment where the company can succeed and the people that depend on me can succeed, and by their success, I succeed.
And that's a great handoff to JJ. Your job is primarily oriented around facilitating the success of others. So what does entrepreneur mean to you?
So to me, it means the common thread with the entrepreneurs that I love working with the most is razor sharp focus on solving problems. And both of these guys have it. That's why I'm so excited for the upcoming year.
Okay, I think we have a question already from a student here, and I'm going to put the microphone in front of you.
My question is for Josh. My name is Ani. I'm a freshman here, and my question is, how does PolySync compare to some other emerging technologies such as Android Auto? Are they your competition, or are you guys following a separate vision? That's my question.
Yeah, so the auto, that's a great question, actually. I don't want to go too deep into it. There's technical subtleties that differentiate. But suffice it to say that Auto has not settled on some sort of standard for software. And things like Android Auto and CarPlay, and there's other things called Genevi. There's different sort of frameworks for infotainment. Those tend to be sort of layers on to solve problems now. We're focused on the problems of what they call level 3, level 4 autonomous vehicles, so fully self-driving cars. And basically, you can't get from where they are today to there without some disruptive change. And something like Android Auto isn't even really in the landscape of that problem. Yeah.
All right, we're up here in the cheap seats now.
Hi, my name's Ali. I have a question for Josh again. I previously worked for an OEM and a tier 1, and I'm just curious as to, are you trying to replace the TCMs and PCMs and vehicles, the camera modules, pretty much all those, or are you trying to get rid of them, or?
Okay, sure. So with that, thank you. My sense is that what my response will be much too high level to satisfy you, but speaking to everybody, I think he's referring to basically the various control modules. They all have little acronyms, but typically they end with CM, control module. These are the little computers that are all scattered about the car. Those won't necessarily all go away, but in general, our philosophy is you should be running the car on high-powered central computers and using software to instantiate the functionality of the car as opposed to little hardware boxes. You can think of that in terms of sort of an analogy to modern data center or something. You have a bunch of VMs and different processes running on them, but physically they are a bunch of the same machines, typically.
You're talking about hard stuff. My question is for Sravan. You gave a really long and detailed answer to the question, what does it mean to be an entrepreneur? Mm-hmm. My question for you is, if you had the chance to do one thing over differently in your journey so far, what might that be?
I think there's definitely a lack of focus on company culture when we started off. And it's something that I thought you make a product, you go to market, you start getting sales and you grow your business, but it doesn't work that way. It's very important to align everyone in your company towards the same vision, to have the same enthusiasm, and to encourage and establish that, you have to establish core values, and you need to get alignment on your vision. So we did an exercise actually 1 year into our startup. We were all working together. We thought we were super focused on the same thing. Gathered all the founders into the room one day and I said, hey, can you in 2 sentences describe what we do? And you'd be amazed how different the answers were. And it took us like 4 hours to sort of get that vision alignment, and that sort of started a chain reaction of getting a core focus on company culture that impacted our hiring, that impacted how people communicated with each other, how we went from sort of a heroism type of engineering culture to more of a humility-based one. So I think if I did that at the start of the company, our trajectory would have been much quicker, and we would have learned faster. And I think there's a lot of benefits also to get mentors who can talk you through that process at a very early stage. So I think understanding that you don't know what you don't know, and then going to mentors and having them accelerate that learning process would be an investment in de-risking the company. So I think the earlier you do that, the better.
Thank you. We have a question here from Bill.
Hi, I'm Connor. I'm a freshman. I want to know, it's for anybody who wants to answer, do you think you have to fail to be a successful entrepreneur, or can you succeed without failing ever?
I can answer that one. Maybe Josh, you can take a turn as well. I think the fear of failure is what you want to get rid of. Having to fail necessarily is not something you want to do, because you're essentially placing a bet on someone else's money or a customer's money or on your brand. So if your brand is associated with failing or not delivering, that's could be damaging in the long term. So you actually want to mitigate your failures and make sure that you learn through the process or inherit knowledge about other people's failures so you can make the best estimation. So the key point here is if you do fail, just make sure you document everything that went wrong so it's not repeated the next time.
Yeah, it's absolutely impossible that you would not fail at something. You don't know what you don't know, and I mean, yeah. So you're going to fail. It depends on how big your failures are, right?
Yeah.
It depends. So big failure would be like can't make payroll, right? Small failure would be like we shipped a bug, right? So the important thing is especially as a CEO and a leader of the company, is that you understand where the potentials are for failure, and you sort of make the box as small as possible, right? And so that when it does fail, and you should expect it to, that we go, okay, like that confirms something else, now we can move forward. Like that was a bummer, like maybe we lost a customer, but we didn't lose all the customers.
You guys are young CEOs in a super, super hot sector. What's the worst advice you've ever gotten? And was it from an investor?
Yeah, there's obviously some investors who try to prep you for acquisition. So we've had conversations where they would say, oh, just like expand your vision, or like you're doing too little or you're doing too much. I think what really matters is letting the market tell you what to do. You shouldn't let investors drive your ship. In fact, in our company culture, we are transparent with investors that they're just along for the journey, and if they don't meet our vision criteria or are not excited about our journey, then they don't get to invest. And there's several instances where people will try to exert their own personal benefits through your company's journey. So you have to be hyper aware of that as a CEO, and protect the people that are depending on you to, like I said, make payroll, and then defend your ethics, defend your brand, defend everything, because there's a lot of market forces that'll, try to take advantage of what you guys are doing.
What about you, Josh? What's the worst advice you got?
I actually want to paint, when I started this thing, I read all the books and things, and I heard all the advice, and I went, I went down the road with one idea about investment, and what I found actually is that taking investment has been the best thing that I have ever done for the company, and primarily, not actually primarily because of the money, although that helps, but because of the incredibly great investors that I've been able to collect. The people that are on our board and who have invested in our company have taught me how to be a CEO, and you know, so actually the worst advice I would ever get would be someone to say like, don't listen to your investors, right? If you find that you don't want to do that, then they are the wrong investor, and you should listen carefully to that, because the money, like, that will destroy your company. Like, that will complete you, you know, it'll gut it. But if you find the right investor and the right people to mentor you just in a general sense, that will pay back dividends that last for you know, forever, for your life, your entire life. I expect to be friends with these people for my entire life. So the worst advice is like, fear investors. You should love investors because they will teach you.
Jay, what about you, with the caveat that if it came from me, you have to take a pass on this question?
I'll take a pass. I want to know from you on mentors, though, both of you, is there one mentor that you met somewhere along your journey that you continue to go back to reference, and when was it, and what is it about them that you makes you keep going back to hear from them?
I have a really interesting story about this. So I was actually, you know, had this great idea for, you know, processing machine vision data to help robotics. And at some day, like, we were really low on cash in the company. We were like 2 or 3 people at the time. So I went on to Craigslist and I said, okay, who needs Python tutoring? And I posted an ad. And then I replied to an ad, actually. And the person who asked for that help turned out to be like the head of strategy for Google Robotics. And so I met him. We did a couple of tutoring sessions, but he was really like excited by the journey I was trying to embark on, and he took me on as a mentoree. And he gave me a lot of advice around, you know, the roles of starting a company, assisted us with finding investor money, and overall helped facilitate a lot of cultural issues that came up during that journey by giving really sound advice. He was in charge of the 7 robotics acquisitions that Google did, and sort of incorporating those startups into Google's culture. So I think it's very important to find the right advisors. There's good advice and bad advice, and that's in the context of what you're trying to do, right? So the good advice might be bad advice for someone else. So you need to make sure your journey is aligned with the advisor group that you're creating. And that group should be different based on where you are in the company. So for example, 6 months from now, like, there's a different set of advisors that'll be more helpful to you than the advisors that you started off with. So you always want to look at the problems on the horizon and then make sure that you have ample advice to solve those problems. So that's sort of my summary there.
Yeah, so I think that there's a danger in advisors and advice in general of using a sample size of like 1 or 2. This is a problem in parenting advice I've found recently. People have 1 kid and they tell you how kids are. So my best advisor has been our first investor. His name's Jason Sept. He's from Techstars Ventures. Okay, so does everyone who know who Techstars is? I'm seeing a collective no.
We'll cover it. It's a large and very important accelerator program advancing high potential startups.
Yeah, so that's who they are. Big accelerator program, biggest in the world. They see like a huge number of new entrepreneurs go through the process and grow, and they're like their sample size is gargantuan. And it was with Jason's help that I really sort of opened my mind to the possibilities of like what a big vision could be for this company and where we could take this. And not in a way of, it was his vision imparted upon me, but it was in a gentle and nudging approach to help me, who was a fairly strong personality, embrace that as my own. And honestly, I keep going back to him, but I completely agree that you end up, now I'm cultivating a new set.
Okay, we have a very patient questioner here in the middle of the room.
Okay, so question for all of you. Developing autonomous vehicles is like a really technically challenging and like subject that requires like really diverse knowledge in a lot of really highly technical fields. So what are your personal backgrounds that enabled you to go into this, and how did you find the people to form your initial team and convince them to join you rather than like some other startup?
My background is in video and image processing. I did my master's at UC Berkeley, and then I went on to work at a startup that was doing video fingerprinting in San Francisco for smart TVs. So it's like Shazam, but it runs in your TV. So I had a lot of experience building back-end systems, doing video fingerprinting, and identifying what you're watching on television for the purposes of TV analytics for the broadcasters. I took that experience into point cloud data processing by doing pattern recognition for different types of features in point cloud data, which is I think the underlying data structure that's going to empower autonomous vehicles. And built some core expertise there. Our CTO, he was doing his PhD at UC Berkeley. His core focus was on wireless sensor networks. So that's where the two ideas sort of merged. You could have a swarm of robots share the context and intelligence that they gather by traveling around the world and crowdsource this 3D map. And this map is useful for essentially making decisions in very complex environments. So you'll start to notice that as you have a conversation about your ideas, people will get excited or they'll like dismiss it. And what you want to do is filter for the people that have the capabilities to help you, but also have the excitement and the cultural alignment. So the team will naturally fall into place. The only prerequisite I would say is have a lot of conversation about what you're trying to do with different people that in your immediate environment and also your extended environment as your team grows.
All right, before we hear from Josh, you're so smart and so intense. What do you do for fun?
For me, I go hiking, usually in the Bay Area. There's a lot of good trails out there in Berkeley. I go bike riding sometimes as well. When I have a lot of free time, I try to read books. But
okay, next time you're back, we're doing a dance break.
Yeah.
Josh, what's your answer to that question?
What I do for fun?
No, we can tell. It sounds like changing diapers is what's on the agenda these days.
Hey, look, I get 3 hours a week to myself. Yeah.
All right.
And that time I'm sleeping. All right.
What's your background? How did you get people excited about you?
Yeah, okay.
In Idaho, of all places.
Oh. The great state of Idaho, you mean? I am a mechanical engineer, and I worked in product design and mass manufacturing, actually, with no real background in robotics other than I liked code and I wrote some of it. While I was at a particular job, I ended up working on panoramic vision systems. So we basically took an iPhone camera and put a crazy lens on it and let you see in 360 degrees. And I got really interested in actually in image processing at the time and understanding those types of algorithms. And that led me simultaneously. I was like, for fun, what do I do for hobbies? Like, hobbies are actually a really important part of innovation. I was flying drones, FPV drones, which is like a thing now. At that time, I was on this like weird forum on the internet. I was using like security cameras, and like, you don't know what those FPV drones are. You put a goggles on, and you put a camera on an airplane drone, and you fly it around, and it's like you're flying it. It was awesome, right? Good. There's like everyone's like, yeah, whatever. Like at the time, I was like, oh my god, and that's what got me started in robotics at all. I was like, I got out of that company. I wanted to start a startup, and what I realized was at the time for about $5,000, I could put a 1080p camera 20 miles from my location in the New York metropolitan area. Which is like, I was like, this is going to be important. This is going to have some kind of impact. And so I started to look at the industry and started to find gaps. I ended up working for a company that was a distributor for sensors and parts and pieces. And my job was to kind of go out to their customers and understand what their needs were. So, and eventually realizing they needed some type of platform and you know, yada, 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 the whole thing unfolded. So I would say that my path really is one of like just curiosity and interest and like intense listening.
Who was your first employee, and did either of you have the money to pay that individual when you recruited them?
So interestingly, yes, actually. So we were totally bootstrapped for like a year and a half, which I am dubious as to like that was a good idea or not, but it was what we did. My first employee was like still in school at the University of Idaho, just like a low-level C programmer, and we started to prototype this like plug-in system for autonomous cars, and just shopped it around to different customers through my old job. And like lo and behold, we got some interest and we got some money, and I paid him and a little bit for myself, and the company was born.
Yeah, so for me, the journey was a little bit different. I came from an engineering background, so I had to go through, you had a job to essentially learn the business development aspect. I had to do that with no salary, so essentially we were doing a lot of customer development interviews, and I recruited 2 other founders at no salary to do that with larger amounts of equity for taking on that risk. So we went, I would say I went about 14 months without pay, which is pretty difficult. And then my co-founders did about 6 months without pay. And then we got our first check in May 2015. Yeah.
We have a question down here in front.
Yeah.
So like for the autonomous vehicles and that kind of stuff, did you guys get into it because like you like hate driving or something like that, or just because you enjoyed the programming and all that kind of stuff and you just kind of wanted to develop that and it was something that interested you, or you were just interested in the pursuit of entrepreneurship and possibly being like CEOs and making a lot of money?
And could you incorporate into your answer to that question why you guys want to work with TechLab at Mcity?
Sure. For us, the journey was unplanned. We initially started with autonomous trains and trying to help prevent train crashes and get rid of wayside signaling for the switches. So we used machine vision to localize the train to the tracks, and we could detect the signal state. We had a working prototype. We went to the railroad industry and they were like, yeah, it's too many regulations. We're not going to do this. And it's actually illegal according to those regulations, what you're proposing. So they said, hey, we have this point cloud data, 90,000 kilometers. Seems like you guys have the expertise to make sense of it. Can you do that? And at that point, you know, we were doing a lot of free pilots for a lot of different companies, and we were kind of getting desperate for our first check. So I zoomed out and I said, what are all the industries that are suffering from this like point cloud data processing problem? And it turns out the automotive industry has the highest amount of depth data sensors that are being integrated into these vehicles. And the process to make sense of that data is very manual today, especially when it comes to maps. So it was a lot of inbound pull from the automotive industry saying, hey, come work in our sector. You guys have like a specific set of skills that might be helpful. And there's scouts at the R&D department that were scouting for us. So the context of Mcity, why it's important for us is there's a lot of when you're developing AI, you don't want to overfit your software to the location in your surroundings. You want to have a wide diversity of seasons and roads and infrastructure. Mcity is a controlled environment where you can introduce those events. And also, Michigan has snow and rain and other types of weather conditions that you don't see in California. So it's important for us to have a presence here, be close to our customers, and also participate in, engaging students at University of Michigan, because there's I believe, untapped talent. There's untapped talent, definitely, and the fact that there's 450 people here listening to CEOs who sound boring. You know, like there's a drive to innovate.
Next time, we're good.
Yeah.
Josh, I see a lot more hands. Could I get an answer from you, and then we're going to have to try and quickly wrap up.
That's actually a great question. So if you want to be a CEO and start a startup because you want to get rich, like just walk away. There are better ways to make money with much higher degree of success and certainty. It's even extremely possible, even if you start a successful company, you know, you raise a lot of money and you look like an outward success, that you as a CEO and a founder walk away with not that much. It's not really about the money. For me, why was I interested in this area? Like, I'm a crazy kind of ADD, all over the place personality. I needed something that I couldn't see the end of, if that makes sense, right? Like, I wanted to see something. I wanted to work somewhere with that appeared to be boundlessly complex and very difficult, and that I knew would provide at least a decade of hard work to get there, right? Like, that's what I wanted. And because I knew that would attract the kind of people that I wanted to be around. So that was my motivation. I think that our work with Mcity is an extension of that, right? Like, the kind of people that would self-select for the type of project that we propose, like build an autonomous car, kids, go ahead, are the right kind of people for, they're the right kind of stuff. And that's
Not to mention the incredible, awesome people that are running the program, right?
Yeah, there are.
All right, last question from here in the middle.
Hi, my name is Jake. Question not directed for anybody specifically, but just wanted to get a better grasp of what the fundraising process looks like and what your sales pitch is. The way I look at it is that you probably have no earnings. It's difficult to put an accurate valuation on the company. So are you relying solely on the vision of the company, or how do you pitch that to an investor?
We're in luck because you both just did this, or are in the process and never stop, right?
So we have an unorthodox way that we fundraised.
Does it involve hikes in the hills of Berkeley?
No. What we did was we actually limited the size of the check that you can make as an investment. And most of these VCs or micro VCs or angel investors don't think twice about smaller checks as opposed to a very large check. We wrote our own term sheet and we did a rolling close. And we said, hey, the first thing that we set out to do as a milestone was how many investors can we get interested in the idea without moving forward into due diligence? So we got about 30, 40 people interested. And we essentially said, there's a lot of demand for what we're trying to do. And here's what we think we're valued at because of the team and sort of the vision and sort of the assets that we've already developed. When we invited those investors to participate with small check sizes, so this might work at the seed round, where they sign these convertible notes, and essentially, for a smaller check, they don't have to think as hard, and the due diligence process is usually shorter. So we ended up with a round where we set the terms and essentially had a lot of investors that were.
And you're lucky because that is highly unusual. Yes?
It's very unorthodox. A lot of the typical Silicon Valley fundraising is you go to the big VCs, you get a big check from them, and it's like a 3 to 4 month process of due diligence, and your chances of getting a yes are very slim. So as CEO, I had to de-risk the fundraising process, and you have to get innovative on how you get the money into the bank account.
All right, Josh, bring us home.
Yeah, so I find that especially in early stage entrepreneurship, there's an outward focus on what do investors want to hear, and that's actually it's kind of a good reference point for what the market wants to hear, because that's what actually investors want to hear. But if you focus too heavily on what do investors want to hear, you end up making a product which is your equity, right? That's all, and that's what you make. Rather than that, the way that I think of fundraising in general is I think about I have to find somebody. I don't fundamentally believe that you, especially in the fundraising process, that you convince anybody. You don't go in and change somebody's mind. So my job is simply to clearly communicate the vision of where I believe the company should go. Clearly communicate the things that I don't know, and then show up. And if there's an investor that believes the same thing, then they've already decided. And then all the other stuff, traction, different customers, your technical assets, your patent portfolio, all that stuff is like ticking the boxes. Don't get it wrong, but it doesn't have to be incredibly right, especially for the first two rounds. Instead, find the investors that believe in you and believe in your vision, and they're already ready to write the check.
All right, let's have a big round of applause for our first panel.
But I do know this. You'll wager 100, you'll wager 500, you'll wager $1 million on a business. You'll hold a gun in your hand after jumping out of an airplane